All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the stream. For those of you who are new, this is a stream where we are live streaming game engine development. So we are writing an entire game engine from scratch using very few libraries, or only really where necessary, or where it doesn't really serve to write, something on its own. For example, loading a bunch of different image formats or something like that. So we are doing 99% of the work ourselves. We are writing the entire engine in C. And at least for right now, we are using Vulkan as our backend. So in addition to that, we are basically building all the systems ourselves. We are targeting for right now Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. Those things are currently supported on the engine. Eventually, we will be expanding to OpenGL and DirectX, and potentially Metal, so that we have a little bit better native support on Mac OS. But at least for right now, we're using Molten VK as a translation layer there. So with all that said, we are basically just going through the paces of writing a scene system now. So we've done a lot of work behind that to kind of get to the point where we are, and we're going to continue that tonight. So before I continue any further, I do want to take a quick second and just thank our supporters, starting with our partners. So those are the highest tier of support on Patreon and YouTube memberships. They are Caden Parker, Aarcia, Gerbolis Inc., Paul S., Super Awesome, and Wen Cheng. I'd also like to take a quick second and thank everybody else on this screen under the supporters section. They are in the other tiers of that support. So thank you very much for that support. It is greatly appreciated. In addition, I'd also like to thank all the viewers and followers of the Twitch channel and people who have subscribed to the YouTube channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. So if you're not able to support me financially, that's totally okay. This is an educational resource that will always remain free. I don't paywall anything. I don't charge anything specifically. All those funds are reinvested back into the channel. So with all of that out of the way, let's jump into our topics for tonight. So there's a couple things that I wanted to bring up before we kind of jump back into scenes, and that is I did a little bit of bug fixing and pushed that code sometime last night, I think. It was basically any of these here that we see that are tagged with an issue number. I've gone ahead and resolved those bugs. So these were all bugs that didn't necessarily need to be handled live. In order to solve them. They were relatively quick and easy things. So if you're interested in those, feel free to have a look at these commits here. With that in mind, we do have some issues here that we need to go through. These ones aren't particularly quick. At some point, I'll probably tackle maybe some of them on stream. The more complicated ones are the ones that require a little bit of troubleshooting, things like that. But I do want to take a moment to point out that if you do find something, feel free to report a bug in here, and that way I will actually see it. If you report it through the Discord server or something like that, I'm not as likely to see it. So if you do run into something, definitely report it here on the repo itself. In addition to that, I did want to also kind of half announce, because it's not completely ready, but I did want to announce that I'm sort of redoing the way that the projects are handled here. So I'm actually setting up a proper board with all of our different work items on there. And this will include features as well as bugs. And the idea here is eventually I want to use this to sort of give a little bit more of a formal roadmap than what we've got, which is sort of just buried in the wiki right now. And have it be sort of more like a live project. And we'll treat this sort of like a professional project, right? So that is the goal with this, and I'm going to try and add features to here and report them in progress. So for example, right now, I don't actually have a feature for it, but I would put scenes here as a feature, for example. So that is coming shortly, and we will probably be referencing that pretty heavily going forward. So just wanted to bring those couple things up. TNT Master, hi, how is it going? I am good. How about you? We're just sort of doing some house cleaning items before we get all the way into the stream here. So, with all of this out of the way, let's go ahead and move back into our code here. So I'm going to get rid of this console because I don't really need it. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and just build this real quick and run, just so that we can kind of see where we're at. So right now we sort of have our scene that's kind of looks the same as it always has, right? Where we can press L on the keyboard and load in our additional items sort of on the fly. And this is all well and good. But we also have added the ability to add and remove these objects dynamically to a scene. So while this may look the same, it is very much different in how it's all operating. So this is all managed by a scene now. And scenes can now actually be unloaded. So if I press U, it unloads everything. Now, we do have a couple of test objects here that don't get unloaded, so we probably need to fix some of those things. But for all intents and purposes, everything should be unloaded. All right. OS, hello. Welcome, welcome. How are you doing tonight? Hopefully you're doing good. So something I just noticed actually, because I could have swore last time when we did, you know what? Let me clean and rebuild, because I was doing some bug fixing. And oh, you know what? I think I might be on the main branch. Get branch status actually. Yep, I'm on the wrong branch. So what did I call that? Scenes, I think. Feature simple scenes. Feature simple scenes. I don't know why tab completion doesn't work on Windows. It's really kind of annoying. All right, let me just make sure I've got latest on everything here. Okay, so quick get log. Looks like I did merge the main branch in, so we should be fully up to date. Okay, so now that I have that, let me exit this, clean, and rebuild, because what I just showed you was the main branch. It is not our feature branch that has all of our actual scene logic in it. So I will go back and rerun. And now, truthfully, what we are looking at is everything is managed by a scene. Now, it's still functionally the same, so I can load in our objects afterwards, right? But now when I press U, everything is unloaded, right? We are getting some errors here. We do need to look into those, because I'm not actually sure what's going on with those. Fail to unload, remove point light. So, like, it's just things I have a feeling that we're just wrong in terms of how we're actually handling our or unloading. Or we could be loading them up wrong. That could be either one. But the goal is we had some to-dos in here. And I want to kind of knock some of those out too, and then start talking about a format, a file format for our scenes. What do you plan to do after finishing Kohi? That's a loaded question. So, as you may or may not know, game engines aren't really ever done until they stop being used, right? You're always adding features or tweaking things or fixing bugs, things like that. So I don't know that Kohi will ever really truly be finished. I think it's going to keep evolving. But what I am going to do is there are going to be several game projects that we are going to use Kohi to actually build and release games. And it's going to start with fairly simplistic games that don't require a lot, just to make sure that everything sort of works. And then, as time goes on, as we add more complexity, as we add more features, we will make more complex games. And so one thing that I want to do is not just make a game engine, but make games to go with that to make sure that the engine is actually usable for making games. And so that's what we're going to do is every once in a while, we are going to basically pause the engine development and switch to making a game using that and patch the engine as needed, but not add any major features while we're making the game. And then, loop back around to it. I had some suggestions for tutorials you should do. So if you have that, a great place to look would be on the Discord server. On our Discord server, there's actually a video suggestions channel on there. So if you jump on there and pop those suggestions in there, I will see them. Cool. All right. So with that, I guess let's have a look at some of these to-dos. So I know there's going to be a lot of them throughout the entire application. I'm just going to focus on the ones that have to do with, namely like the testbed ones, loading and preparing, this kind of stuff, right? Because I know we had some in here. Move this load to key binding. Okay, so that's another thing that we could do, right? Is we could actually, we're loading the scene right off the bat, and technically we probably shouldn't be doing that, right? We should probably load the scene up on demand. So that's one thing we can fix. I wanted to see you maybe make an OS or a programming language. Actually, so it's funny. There are people on the Discord server that are actively doing that as we speak. So that's, we actually have an OS dev channel in development discussion on the Discord server. So there are people that are doing that. We also have a language design discussion happening on that server as well. So if you go ahead and head to the Discord server, you'll find those things there. I probably won't be doing that anytime soon, only because game engines are such a gigantic thing on their own that I'm probably not going to have time to take on any of those projects, because this is sort of a free time thing for me, so I only have so much time to actually work on it. It's always something that's kind of interested me and something that maybe I'll take on at some point, like maybe making a scripting language plugin or something like that for the game engine. So in that sense, I might do one. But for an operating system, probably not. At least not like a tutorial. Okay. So let's see. We have a bunch of stuff in here. What is all of this doing? So we're in application update. We've got a bunch of dead code here. Let's get rid of this. So we're kind of updating the lights manually, or we're updating one of the lights manually. So we could probably add something to that in order to kind of make that a little bit more dynamic, because we are going to need to start thinking about how we want to actually manipulate our objects within a simple scene. Instead of doing them this way and maintaining them this way. This is one way of doing it, but certainly not the only one. Oh, I'm not on the Discord server. So I believe I have it on the Twitch channel. Let me see. I think I put a link there. Let me double check and make sure. Yes, but just in case, I will drop a link here as well. So there is there's the link for the Discord server for anybody that wants it. So yeah, definitely hop in there, because there's discussion happening around that. There's a few people in there that are super passionate about that love talking about that kind of stuff. So you probably find a great discussion in there. Okay. So, well, let's see. So we have a couple things in here that we probably need to fix. One thing is that on our application render, we are still doing a sort of a lookup on this every single time, which is kind of crappy. Read from frame config. Let's see. I don't think I meant frame config there. I'm guessing I meant game config there. So there's that we could address. Let's see. A non-hard-coded index. So this is the pick packet. So that's actually kind of handled outside the realm of what we're doing right now. So I'm going to leave that one. Resize event. That's not really a big deal. Okay. So I think most of that, there's a couple things in there we can kind of pick out. But yeah, we have some to-dos. So we probably could generate like a few streams just on to-dos alone, quite honestly. Okay, so before we get off track here, let's see. What do we have? Let's take a look at some of these guys, right? We eventually want to configure render views from file. I don't really want to do that yet because I have a feeling that's going to wind up changing anyways. Let's go ahead and change how we're going to do the simple scene, right? Because I think we probably ought to have something in here to only render the scene after it's been loaded, and we're going to eventually want to load more than one scene. So I think we should probably start there first. Tammin, good evening. Welcome to have you here. Or welcome and great to have you here. I can't talk tonight, apparently. Okay. So let's do, we'll take all of this up through our light configuration and everything, and our initialize and our load. I'm going to take all of this out of here and put a private method down here at the bottom. So let's call this, we'll say static void load test scene. All right, and we'll plop all this in here. We are going to need this state. I don't think we're doing a cold cast anywhere there, so let's go ahead and grab the state, which we have here. And then we're just going to need to take in the game instance as well. So what I'm going to do is copy kind of both this way. Right. And then go to here at the bottom. And we want this guy here. Right. And then we're going to forward declare this guy at the top. Right. And then we should be good to go to hook this up to a key binding to actually load it on the fly. So the other thing I'm going to do is I kind of like the ability that we have to actually load the car and the Sponza sort of on the fly, but we've proven that works. I think it's time that we can kind of do away with that test code. So where is that? So here is our Vulkan and our Sponza. So I'm going to grab all of this, including the dead code comments. And I'm also going to move this down here. So let's see, we have our cubes, our lights, and then where is, I thought the Sponza was in here somewhere, and the car. Maybe not. Maybe not. So let's do it before the lights, actually. So right here. Right. And we can get rid of these because those are just dead code now. Right, so we have the Vulkan and we have the Sponza. I think, though, didn't we have the Sponza somewhere else? Nope, that's it. Okay, I guess we removed that code. I was thinking it was kind of split up, but I guess it isn't. I guess we removed it. All right, so we have that. Do you know if there is a to-do highlighting plugin like yours for Visual Studio? Are you talking about the one where I say like to-do and it highlights it like that one? I don't know if it's actually available for full-blown Visual Studio or not. I know there might be one. I know the one that's for here is just called, I think it's to-do highlight. So there may be something similarly named for Visual Studio. I'm not sure. You'd have to look. I know for Vim, I wound up having to create my own because I use Vim at work. But at least for here, that's the one I use. I just followed your setup video on YouTube, and now I have highlighting permanently, which is amazing. Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of kind of calling those things out, especially ones like especially ones like this, right? Because that really shows up. You're not missing that guy, and it also highlights it over here in the scroll bar, which is pretty nice. So that's neat. Yeah, it does make life way easier. There's also I could have swore, I know Visual Studio has this. I could have swore that there was also something down here, like a view that picked up on to-dos. I could be wrong. Maybe there's not. I mean, you can always search for it, I guess. I thought there was something in here somewhere. You mind me asking what kind of software you develop for work? Yeah, so I, it's basically like 3D room planning software is what I can say. So we, you know, the ability to sort of lay out rooms in 3D, things like that. So it's all web-based in that case. So I use TypeScript and Vim for that. Because I just like it better than Visual Studio. And I might actually switch to Vim at some point. For this, I just don't have the debuggability that I have with this quite yet. So I haven't figured that out. But I'm way faster with Vim than I am with this. Let's see. Is there... I'm just going to search for this for like half a second longer and then... Yeah, I don't think... I could have swore that there was a... like a to-do thing here. I know Visual Studio has it by default, but I guess this doesn't. Anyway, you can always just search for to-do, right? It'll find everything. Okay, anyway. Let's see. So we've got that moved. And then I think we had something in the game state as to whether or not the models were loaded. So those we are actually going to get rid of. Let's see. So we have state main scene unload triggered. And then this performs the unload in the middle of an update. That's probably not the cleanest way we should do it. We should probably set something up in the scene to just do it on the next frame. So we might want to actually have the scene manage this, right? We also have models loaded, which we really should be saying state main scene state, right? If that is equal to, what is it? Simple scene loaded, right? So if it's loaded, then we're going to unload it. Otherwise, we're not going to do that. So let's get rid of this models loaded, right? We don't need that anymore. We can get rid of this. We can get rid of this. We don't need this. If the scene state, main scene state, is less than or equal to, actually just less than, because if it's loading, we don't want to do that either. So yeah, less than simple scene state loading. Yeah. So if the scene state is less than or equal to, no, just less than loading, then we're going to load the main scene. And we will say simple scene load. Oh, wait. We need to call our, what did I call that? What did I call that? Load test scene. That should probably be load main scene. We won't actually need these functions once we actually get to the point of actually having configurable scenes, which is kind of what I want to work towards next. We won't actually need this sort of scaffolded structure, right? So we're going to pass game inst. Okay. Shouldn't you also update the scene state? Update the scene state where? You mean like when we call loading, like in this loading thing here? Because if you look, when we actually do and unloading, yeah, so when we actually do the scene load, we do some checks to see what state we're currently in. We flip the flag to loading, and then we do all the loading of stuff that's been added, and then we set it to loaded. So we have the scene manage that instead of it being managed outside the scene. We can query for it, but we should never really be messing with the state of the scene outside the sort of simple scene itself, if that makes sense. Get rid of this fix me. We've done that. Actually load scene. Am I forgetting anything? Yes, I see an error here. We don't need that anymore. Let's see. I think that's all I actually need to do. So let's build. We still got those errors to fix. Oh. Still running the game. Let me actually shut the game and try to build. Let's see. Oh, okay. This is void, but it should be returning a B8, which actually makes a lot of sense. So let's go to the caller of this, check that. Whoops, get rid of that not there. All right, K error loading main scene. All right, let me build this real quick. Make sure I didn't miss anything else. What do we have here? Oops. Oh, our default return state is going to be true. All right, so if we make it all the way to the end here, you know what? Instead of that, let's get rid of this error because we're already reporting an error, and we'll just return this. Okay, cool. I'm a bit behind the latest streams. Yeah, so the idea with the simple scene is that things like state and the loading of objects and the status of those objects being loaded, that should all be handled by the scene. And that will keep us to only having to manage things like the configuration of objects and when those objects get added to the scene. Then we can manage those outside the scene. But that's all we should really have to manage. We shouldn't have to worry about the rest of it. There is something that simple scene, because I think we do have an update loop here that's not being called, I don't think. So we do need to actually work that in because there's some logic in here that we need to be adding. So we probably ought to hook that in as well. Let's do testbed main, because that's actually the thing I put it to do about having the scene manage it. I should probably be doing that. So updates. So right now I have this unload the level here if triggered, right? Which is kind of poopy. That's not really this. We shouldn't care about this, right? When we trigger an unload, we should tell the scene, hey, unload, and then the scene should be responsible for actually delaying and triggering that thing. So I think the way, yeah, I guess. Okay, there's a couple changes I want to make in this update, actually, because we're actually doing things here we probably shouldn't be doing if we don't have a scene actually loaded, right? So the first one of those things is we need to simple scene update, right? We need to pass state main scene. We need the address of that. And then we need the frame data, the P frame data rather. And then we need to check that. So if for some reason that failed, then I guess we'll say K error failed to update main scene. Now, we're probably not going to kick out of this loop. We'll probably just treat this as a, I guess I can say a warning, right? Because it's not like critical. We shouldn't have to shut down the application if this fails for some reason. I'm going to try and keep things running, if possible. I kind of want to avoid crashes. That being said, we should not be calling this if the scene is not actually like up and running, right? So we only want to perform updates on a loaded scene. So that means we obviously need to say if the state main scene state is greater than, no, actually it needs to be specifically equal to simple scene loaded, then we can do this. And it's specifically equal to that because if we're unloading it, we don't need to be doing updates. If we are loading it, we probably also shouldn't be doing updates. I don't think. There may be a couple of reasons that I can think of that we'd want to do that, but for right now, I'm going to treat it this way. Okay, so our scene update is tied in here. We're going to take this code, which is the unload triggered, and we're going to move it over to simple scene and our update. So the first thing we need to do is obviously if we don't have a scene, we're going to boot out, right? Because that's dumb. Why would we try to update a scene that we don't have? So I'll paste this in here, and we're going to say the main unload triggered should probably be a state, actually. Now that I think about it, right? We don't really, storing this as a Boolean is kind of a waste. But we could store it as a state. Which actually, yes, it means I'm going to have to change this code here, but I'm okay with that. So if this is greater than or equal to scene state loaded, Then we're going to call update. And then if the... how do I want to handle this? So our scene unload really isn't going to be a true unload. It's going to be an unload trigger. You have 4.5k coffees. Nice. That's a lot of coffees. I should put like some insanely high coffee award in there. Oops, hit the microphone. TME, hello. Welcome. All right. Yeah. Let's go to the declaration of this. We'll take a look at the scene's state. So right now we have uninitialized, initialized, loading, loaded, and then unloading. But unloading is only ever triggered once we actually start the unload. I guess we could just use unloading, because we already have it, right? So yeah, let's do that. So we already kind of have it scaffolded in place. Instead of adding a new state, the first thing we do in here is set the state to unloading, right? And then we actually perform the unload. So instead of actually performing the unload here, what we're going to do is we're going to just allow this to return true. And this unloading logic is actually going to happen. It's going to be called by our update, right? So and do we want to destroy this too? Have you ever used data-oriented design? Yes, I have done. It's something I do intend on touching on at some point. We're not really doing that now because you kind of have to structure things in a very specific way, and it makes doing something like this in small pieces very hard. So it might be something that we refactor to later in certain aspects, certain performance critical aspects. But yes, we will be doing that. I'm just kind of thinking through the logic right now of how I want to perform this actual unload. So now I'm thinking I probably want a static B8. What do I want to call this? Actual unload. Simple scene. And perform this unloading here. Which I don't see we actually return false anywhere, so I'm actually going to switch this to avoid. Have you ever already profiled Kohi? It would be nice to see how you approach this. So I've done some light profiling, but nothing crazy yet. I've been mostly focused on feature development and getting it up and running. I can tell you without a doubt and with absolute certainty that this is not optimized in any way, shape, or form, because we haven't really spent some time going through that. One of the things that I haven't done yet, like I haven't done any SIMD, for example. I haven't done any of that at all. Yeah, I haven't really optimized yet, per se. I don't even have compiler optimizations on. So it is something that we are going to be looking into, and I'm probably not going to be able to push it off too much longer, simply because at some point we are going to have to start doing release builds to start looking at some of those things. So Obviously, we don't want to be releasing a debug build when we go to release a game with this engine. And we're going to be starting that soon because we are going to be working on a game this year. So that is coming. It's not started yet, but it is coming. Okay, so here is the actual unload. I guess I'll call this simple scene. Game engine uses SIMD. It does not yet. I have that in the plans. Actually, it's so funny. Somebody just asked me that earlier today, or maybe it was yesterday, if I was planning on using SIMD. And yes, I am going to, but that's the thing. So Taman hit it right in the head. Before implementing these optimizations, you have to profile to have a baseline, right? Because otherwise, what are you optimizing, right? And so we haven't really done that yet. And so we don't even know where the performance issues are in the engine yet. I have a pretty good idea or an educated guess, but you don't optimize based off off an educated guess. You optimize based on the profiling data that you actually have. And since I haven't done that, I don't have that data. But that is something that we're going to probably spend quite a lot of time doing. I don't know, maybe in a couple months. Not 100% sure. Depends on where we wind up with feature development. Because one thing that we're doing is we're trying to get at least a baseline of features up and running first. And then we're going to kind of move on to making it fast. So we're going to get it working, and then we're going to get it fast, right? There's no sense in trying to make everything blazingly fast if it's not even fully spec'd out or designed yet, right? But by the same token, we're not going to deliberately break any performance rules or write things to be slow per se, right? We're still going to keep it in mind as we write stuff. It's just not necessarily going to be our primary focus until we actually get things up and running. All right. So the simple scene update. If the state, not state, if the scene state is equal to simple scene state unloading, then we are going to do the actual unload. So simple scene actual unload scene, right? And actual unload is going to flip the flag to unloaded, right? So this unloading is only going to be true for one frame. There are issues with doing it this way too. So if we have multiple scenes and we're sort of transitioning from one to the other, this is going to cause frame rate drops, right? Especially when we have complex scenes. So we probably are going to have to revisit this and make some of this unloading stuff asynchronous so that we don't actually get held up by it. All right. So with that, the only other thing I need to figure out is destroy. Because I don't know if we want to have the unload and destroy happening at the same time. Now that I think about it, I'm trying to consider a use case where we would ever unload a scene but not want to destroy it. Because I believe the unload, or actually I guess now the actual unload, it unloads the skybox, doesn't unset it though. It unloads the mesh, doesn't unset any of those. It does remove our directional lights. So I guess we're going to have to... game menu could be a separate scene. Yeah, it could. We are actually going to implement our UI system a little bit differently, though. So a UI could potentially use a scene, but the UI system is going to be kind of its own thing. So we don't want to tie it to the same workflow as a scene, because UIs are generally handled differently than a scene. However, that's really only true for, I guess you could say, a traditional 2D UI. So if you're talking UI elements like your standard buttons and image boxes and things like that, those things are handled vastly different than the way a scene is handled. And so you wouldn't necessarily want to use a scene for that. But if your UI is like a game UI that is in 3D, then you probably would have it either be a separate scene, or you would have it follow around the camera or something within the scene, something along those lines. So it really depends on your implementation, right? So it can be a scene, but I don't want to force it to be a scene. Okay, so that's the simple unload. So this just triggers that. The update then says perform the actual unload if unloading. I guess I could have it destroy it at the same time, because I can't think of a scenario now where you'd ever want to, I guess, not destroy it. So I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into, and you know what, I can always change this later. Maybe this is just a thing that simple scenes do. Maybe more complex scenes have the ability to be loaded more than once, right? So we just need scene here. I think this is a rule that I'm just going to put in place, is unloading it destroys it. Which makes me consider, like, maybe it should actually be not something that we actually expose. Game menu could be a separate scene. I think those should be separate. You think what should be separate? You think? Are you talking about the unloading and destroying? Unloading a scene should clear it from memory, in my opinion. Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. I was initially thinking of a scenario where you have, let me bust out good old paint here. So I was initially thinking of a scenario where you have a few scenes active at once. Let's see. Why are you not drawing? There we go. All right, so where you have a couple of scenes active. So like you have scene A, you have scene B over here, and then you have like a transition scene that sort of overlaps them a little bit, right? And as you're progressing through this transition scene, you're unloading this guy and loading up this guy, right? But then if you go the other way, then you would want to unload this guy and re-upload this guy, right? And that was what I was thinking was the sort of the use case of having that. But to be honest, I could probably just as quickly load up the configuration and just stand the whole thing up again new. So Paint is the best painting software. Yeah, I mean, for getting points across, like, that's pretty effective. Thinking games like Ascent, where you constantly move between different areas, like the city and the dungeons. Yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking, like, for this, right? But I think I'm going to get rid of destroy. I think I'm just going to have this be part of the unload, and that's that. I guess it depends. Some games unload outside whenever you're in a building, and then unload indoors whenever you exit, but they stay in memory. So that would just be, you wouldn't necessarily unload in that scenario, you just wouldn't render it. So if it's staying in memory, you would just turn off enabled for the level in that case, or the scene. So actual unload. We will also destroy the scene. But we're going to do it in line. And then return true. Right, which eliminates the need for this check, right? Because this is the auto destroy that we had, or the auto unload if you try to destroy. But if it's all one step, no longer matters. So here's just where we're clearing that out. So I think, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. You know what? Simple scenes are just simple. They don't need to be any more complex than that. So destroy just happens automatically whenever you unload. So we will just go here. A scene is also destroyed when unloading. Boom. Simple. I think that's how I'm going to roll for now. Because it keeps me from having to worry about those things as separate steps. So when we trigger the unload, main scene unload triggered. Why do we still have this? I thought I removed this. Okay. So this would just be, I guess it would literally just be simple scene unload, right? And it would just be the address of state main scene. And all this does is just sets this flag, which gets used on the next update. So if our update loop's broken, we're screwed, but other than that, we're fine. Okay, so this should actually give us the ability to load it and unload it, right? So we're only going to be able to unload this, in our debug code at least, if it's loaded. And we're only going to be able to load it if it is less than loading, which brings me to, we have a load main scene. So we have create, and then we have all of our meshes being added and stuff like that. And then we have initialize and then load. So in theory, we're doing this every time, but this is kind of the equivalent of like loading a scene from configuration, right? That's what this is going to all wind up doing. So I think I'm okay with all this being grouped together. Let's go ahead and build and make sure I didn't break anything. Yeah, exactly. It's not really worth any extra thought at this point. I totally agree. Let's just get it. Let's get it up and running, right? Oh, this is void, isn't it? It is void. So I got a couple in here. Oh, I don't need this anymore either, because we already checked that up top. Okay. Build. So in theory, the only other thing we need to change in here is updates. Whoops, we want our testbed main update. So we do the main scene update here. We also are going to need this same check for this bit of logic here. Let's see here. All right, we've got a couple things that we included there that we shouldn't have. This stuff has to come out. Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah, I think we can strip out all the camera stuff. The mouse movement, yeah, that stuff should be stripped out and put here. Okay. So the only stuff we should be checking is this. Now, we also have some allocation differences. That could be moved down here, which is actually now making me think that this check can actually just be combined with this one. So just to keep things in the same order, we'll just put it afterwards. Now it's all under the same check. Right, so we only do these things if the main scene specifically is loaded. So now when I launch, ooh, we get a crash. Sweet. All right, so let's take a look at console.log and see what all this rubbish is. Graphics pipelines created. Let's see. Acquire next image is failing. That's interesting. Is there anything else, or are they all literally the same thing? All right, so let's think about what would make acquire. So what are we running normally that we're not running now? So this is the updates. Oh, I'll bet it's populating the render packet for that. We are not building a render oh, I think I know what it is. So this is actually building the render packet data for the skybox, which I think we can skip and be fine. But that may not be true for the world render pass. In fact, actually, no. We actually can't. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's going to be related to that. I'm probably going to have to debug through it to figure it out, to be quite honest. So what we should be doing, we populate the render packet for those two things. So we have the skybox and the world, and then we do UI, and then we do pick. So this is all the stuff for the UI. And then here's where we build that packet, and then we build the pick packet. And then that packet gets thrown off to the renderer to be rendered. So because we're not doing this, let's take a look at let's look at the skybox one first. Skybox. So this render pass has to be begun, has to be started. And this is because of the way that we configured our render passes when we set up the application. So we actually still technically need to do this regardless. Because I have a feeling it's actually this one, not the world, that's messing us up. Because of this. So these are all our draw calls here. So we skip that if we don't have the packet extended data, aka the skybox data, right? So I wonder if I literally just say let's see. Do I set the extended data here? I do. But if I set the extended data here, then this check would technically never fail. Let me try something in testbed main. And this is a complete hack, but I'm just going to try and see if this actually fixes the issue. So I'm going to say else here, right? So if we don't have this loaded, we are going to use the skybox render view. This is a terrible hack, right? And this is the reason I'm saying we might actually have to change some stuff with how our render views work. So when I went in here to generate a packet for this, this actually only ever gets called though if we have a skybox. So it's not the build, it's actually the run that actually is missing. So this is not going to fix it. I need something in let me try it anyways, actually, because it should run if we configure it, right? So we'll build this. We'll grab a skybox packet. I'm actually just going to do this. Skybox data. Packet views. Skybox is 0. This may be a bigger thing to fix than I initially thought, but we'll see if this is right. Nope. So we don't have... Oh, interesting. How did it create an extended data from skybox that doesn't exist? Skybox packet data. We copy the packet data. So that's the extended data. We should probably be checking the extended data and let's check skybox data actually. So skybox data and skybox data skybox. Because right, that could be a null pointer where this still exists, which is basically what I'm passing it. Nope. And I'm going to assume that that's probably because it's because we're not doing something that we should be, because the scene is not loaded. Let's see. This is the kind of stuff you run into when you're programming live, folks. It's always lots of fun. So let's see what I missed here. I guess let me set a breakpoint, right? So that is a null pointer. So when we build that, we have our skybox data. That should be the same thing, right? Extended data. So we copy that in there, the skybox data. Okay, and then when we render, did I not set the breakpoint for that? I thought I did. Why is that not getting called? So we're building the packet. This view, there's no geometry, which is expected. But everything else is populated, so it should be... It's interesting that we're not hitting that breakpoint. Oh, right, because we hadn't fully booted up yet. So once we start the reboot, the resize, the render loop rather, we resize, we've begun the render pass, we have skybox data, but we do not have a skybox. So this gets skipped. What do we skip? We skip the use of the shader, the binding, the application of the global and instance variables, the draw call. None of that should matter. Then we end the render pass. Okay. Then the next system, we are rendering the world. So we begin the render pass, we use the shader, we apply the globals. Oh, that's where we're going wrong. Shader ID is 1. Have we created our graphics pipelines? Yeah, we have. So those are all loaded. Okay. Let me restart. I stepped over that thinking that was going to pass, and it didn't. So this is the skybox. I'm pretty sure that one's fine. But this one, the shader ID. So the max shader count is 1024. Shader ID we're looking for is 1. Okay, so we do get that shader. It looks, whoops. It looks to be valid. Okay. Render a frame number. Huh. So the UI, oh, the material shader ID hasn't been set up yet. Well, that's interesting. So where does that actually get set up? So when we acquire a material, so because we haven't loaded a material yet, we don't actually have the material shader ID, which I think is what's causing all this to fail. Oh, that's interesting. And it also makes sense because we haven't loaded. Wow, that's an interesting bug. Okay, so now it makes sense. Soul Foam, thank you so much for the follow. Appreciate it. Okay, so now that I've had a minute to rack my brain, now I understand what's going on. So what we were doing before was during the sort of boot up phase of the game, we were sort of loading what is now our scene automatically. The problem with that is it would automatically do things like fill in our shader ID for our built-in shader material because we were immediately loading up materials before we actually started the render loop. So all this stuff was configured before because we were actually loading the scene before we actually started the render loop or kicked that off, right? And so in this case, this is still invalid ID, right? Because I just happen to know what that number is. Because we actually haven't loaded up any material yet and we're trying to render. So, since this never got called, we're going to actually have to handle this a slightly different way. So we basically just need to we need to do this sooner is basically what it is. So I think if we look at engine and we look at our systems startup, we have our, I think it's in post boot initialize where we do that. So we have our texture system, our font system, our material systems all the way down here. And I think our shader system is actually in preboot. So yeah, here's our shader system here in preboot. So we didn't have the guarantee initially when we started setting this stuff up that those things were happening in that order, but we actually do have that guarantee now. So when I go to initialize the shader system, or I'm sorry, the material system, I should be able to go ahead and set that then, because we should already have that material actually set up. So this check here, I basically just need to get the material, or get the shader by this name, right? Which probably means that I can do the same for the UI. Right, so actually this whole section of code right here can come out. You know what? Actually, I'm going to take this section with it because we don't need to do that anymore here. We need to do that much sooner. So material, whoops, material system initialize. We need that to happen here. So after we do all of this, invalidate everything first, which I suppose is fine. I could still leave that. I'm going to do this after we fill all of this stuff out, right? After we create the default material, I'll do it here. So basically what we're going to do is we'll do, instead of wrapping these in ifs, right? The first thing we'll do is we'll grab the built-in material shader, right? And we will get rid of this guy and just do these, right? And then we will also come down here and we will get the built-in UI shader, get rid of this, move that back, and do that. So this should fix that bug. Okay, so let's build this. And, oh, why is this bleating? Incompatible pointer. Wait, what? Oh, this is get by ID. Shader system get is what I want, which I think just takes a string. Yeah. Shader system get. Perfect. Okay, so let's run. And now we have a shader ID, which is good. So I can continue on with that. All right, cool. So that fixed that bug. That was kind of an unexpected one, but, well, I guess partially unexpected. I was wondering what was going to break when we started loading things this way. But you can see here we have no scene loaded, but we can still move the camera around. So you can see here I'm rotating this around. I can move this around in space, and we can kind of see those values changing. So we know everything's working, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and load a scene. And there we go. So we have a scene loaded on demand. And now I'm going to unload that scene. And it's unloaded. We still have to take care of these errors. I'm going to try loading it again. And we failed. So question is why? All right. So access violation reading. So did we actually release any of these textures? I don't know, because I think we actually turned that off. So what location was it actually failing to read? I'm betting it has to do with material. That's an invalid material ID. The geometry. Oh, I bet I know what happened. Okay. What is that color theme? This is Groovebox Dark Hard. So I have the Groovebox themes installed. It's just an extension. And then if I do color theme, it is this Groovebox Dark Hard. Welcome, by the way. No problem. All right, so I think, actually, this makes me wonder if this was even an issue. Nope. Okay, cool. So my terrible hack can go away. So that's cool. Can unload that. All right, so this actually can go. This was just debugging code. I can get rid of that. All right, so I'm thinking that when we actually do the unload, I'm wondering if our meshes themselves actually wind up getting reset or not. So I guess the way to test that is probably going to be, let's load this up. Here we are. I'll load, and then I'll unload, and I'll come in here to our application updates right after we have our state, and I'm going to put a breakpoint. And we'll examine our state. Let's get rid of some of these things. So our state meshes, let's go to sub-0. Look at that one first and just see what we have here. So the generation is invalid, geometry count 0, geometries is a null pointer, so that's good. And it looks like the transform was zeroed out as well. So at least the first one is correct. I just wonder if we actually have one of these things that didn't properly get unloaded. Let's see. So that one looks valid. This one looks valid. Or I should say invalid, I suppose. So our meshes look good. Okay, those are the only 5 that we used. What about the skybox? So the skybox. Interesting. So the skybox didn't release its texture. That's an issue. We do have internal data though, so maybe that's still valid. Looks like we have the filter modes and all that stuff, right? So, oh, interesting. So we have, so the texture is valid, but the cube map's internal data is gone. So we released the, okay. So I guess we should probably, when we unload the cube map, we should probably also release the texture. When we do the mesh unload, do we geometry system release? We destroy the geometry. And we do release the material here. But I'm thinking we probably, yeah, so the material release should also release the textures, right? So destroy material releases the textures. So I'm thinking when we destroy the cube map, we should probably, or when we destroy the skybox, we should probably also release its texture. So let's go to skybox, and during load, we acquire the cube, right? And this is auto release is on. When we unload, we release the geometry. Didn't we say though that that should? Oh, only if it's a material. I should probably actually debug that and see what happens. Get rid of that. So we will load, unload. Okay, so we release the resources. texture map, we release the resources. Let's just change this to SB real quick. All right, so here is where we probably get rid of the internal resources for that, right? We dispose of the configuration, which makes sense. Although that doesn't look like it got rid of all the configuration. Didn't get rid of the cube map name. It did kill all of this, but it did not get rid of this cube map name, which is a problem. All right, we can come back to that. Let's see. So the geometry system release is what we want to look at. Right. So destroy geometry, render destroy geometry. Yeah. So this is only going to release the material if there is one, and we don't have a material for the skybox. So that is why that is happening. So we are going to have to do that manually here. So texture system release, we will say SB. What's that? Cube map texture. And I guess we should probably just set that to 0. And then we also noticed that when we were getting rid of the config here, the SB config cube map name, which was, that is a character array. So we'll say if the name exists. We should probably clean this up as well. So a string, of course. Of course, I don't have the string here. So include core k-string, string length, u32 length equals that. And then k free SB config cube map name length +1 times size of char, which I know is just 1, but I like to be explicit. Mem tag string. Okay. And then cube map name should be set to 0. Cool. So that should clean that up as well. By the way, I know some of you guys are already doing this, but if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to jump into the chat and, speak up, ask. I will answer to the best of my abilities. What kind of bleating are we getting here? Oh, really? Oh, texture system release wants a texture name. I don't remember having to do that before. Okay. Well, that means that this actually needs to happen up here then. So if we have a cube map name, then we need config.cubeMapName. So we release the texture, then clean up the string. And I suppose we should probably also check to make sure this exists. Okay. Let's see if that resolves the issue. So we're going to load and unload. Get rid of the breakpoint. And it looks like we are attempting to do something terrible here. Which makes me think that that might be constant assigned from somewhere else. Oh, you know what? I think it is actually, because I think we're creating that configuration manually. So I actually don't need to do this. I think I could just set it to that because it's constant data. All right, so load, unload, and load again. And it looks like we're still getting the same thing. So I guess let's check out the call stack here. Ooh, I wonder if we're doing this mid-frame. Well, it is loaded, so it says. So we're building the packet. What geometry? We're on the first geometry. Okay, so we have, what do we have in the geometry here? Generation 0, material. What if the material is not being properly released? The material is an invalid ID. I mean, diffuse colors blacked out. The textures, I mean, this is all invalid. Invalid, invalid, valid. So why would this be generation 0? Oh, wait a minute. Weren't we doing something? Weren't we doing something in testbed main? Yeah. We're doing this manually here. Okay. Okay, so we're zeroing out the meshes when we destroy them. Unload. We need to do the actual unload. So we're doing the mesh unload. Did we do a mesh destroy? I don't think we did. Do we have? We have a mesh destroy. Mesh destroy does not do it either, though. Well, this does set the generation to invalid ID, though. Why are they 0 then? Doing that. So we free the array of geometries, we zero out the mesh data. Then we come back and we invalidate the geometry right here. Try this one more time. Just need to examine the state that it's in. So it's currently loading this. It has not tried to load the textures, right? It's not tried to load up any of that stuff yet. But its generation is, in fact, 0. I guess we need to check that our destroy is actually doing what it's supposed to. So let's go back to simple scene. And we will we'll put a breakpoint here. On the actual unload. Oops. So here's the load. Here's the unload. Okay. So we release each geometry. Let's see what this is doing. Destroy the geometry. We invalidate all the IDs. We see that that's happening. We release the material. So the material, we do have auto release on. Well, the reference count in this case is more than that. So, okay. We set the entry. Zero out the material. Reference count is 0. Okay, so we reset those. Okay. We free the geometry. So now the geometry generation is 0. Then we come back and we set the generation to invalid ID. Okay. So if we go to testbed main, our first geometry, what is it? Meshes 0. Can I not do that yet? Application update. Yeah, we just need to be in the right scope there. So its generation is invalid. Okay. So I think our unload is actually working correctly. So if we go here to update and I just pause that, like the reason these aren't trying to render is because that's invalid ID. So that actually does make sense. So where that's changing is somewhere when we reload again. So I guess let's have a look at load main scene. So we have simple scene create. I'll put a breakpoint there. I will continue the application and hit L. I have a feeling it might have something to do with this too, but we'll see. So we see here our first mesh still has a generation of 255. So our simple scene create, all that does is zeroes out the memory. sets up some arrays. Nothing crazy, right? And it hasn't changed this guy. Skybox config, the state skybox. Let's have a look at this real quick. So the cube map name is null. The config looks like it's zeroed out correctly. Okay, so I think we're fine there. The cube map has a null texture. This stuff hasn't been zeroed out, but I suppose that's fine. Null internal data. Geometry here. All invalid IDs. Material is null. Instance ID is null, or is invalid ID. Okay. So the skybox create all that does is just copy over config, right? Nothing crazy there. Simple scene add skybox. I don't think that's what's messing with it. So let's see. Here is our cube config. So mesh create. Okay, we're setting. So we are zeroing out the memory. But then we're setting the generation back to invalid ID. So that's not what's breaking it. Simple scene add mesh, state mesh is 0. Right, all that does is just push it onto the array, so that's fine. I'm just going to skip over these other ones. Right, like I don't think it's any of this stuff. So I'm going to skip past all of this and come down here to initialize. Still hasn't changed yet. So we'll go to initialize. We do the skybox initialize. We do a mesh initialize. Which all this does is just set up the geometries array. No big deal. Right, so we just do that 5 times. Not a huge deal. Return. Still generation of invalid ID. So that's not it. And then simple scene load. So in this case, we load the skybox. Scene meshes. So let's do scene meshes sub-0. Oops. Should be an arrow, not an underscore. Let's see. Okay, so our load did actually flip this over to 0. Okay, so I think, yeah, the answer is going to be somewhere in mesh load. Acquire from config or load from resource. Be interesting to know which mesh it's actually failing on, because it could be either one of these two paths, right? So I'm just going to continue and see. So it's probably failing on that first path. So we have mesh load. Let's have a look here. We'll reload. We'll load, which is going to put me through a bunch of breakpoints. All right. I'm going to disable this breakpoint real quick. Actually, yeah, let me disable. Let all those things load. See, the thing that I'm suspicious of is we're getting all of this on the first load, but not the second. So we'll unload. Now we'll activate this guy, and we'll load once more. I don't think it's the initialization. I think it's going to be somewhere in here. So we acquire from config. Max geometry counts. Register geometries. Ooh, I wonder if our geometry system is somehow holding on to stuff. Okay, but we did get an ID of 2, so that's not totally out of the realm of possibility. So we create a geometry. Our render create geometry, I don't think this actually does anything we need to step into, but all this does is upload the geometry. Loads it into render buffers. Yeah, I think we can step out of this. I don't think it's a Vulkan issue. So here is where the generation gets increased. And then config material name is test material. So material system acquire, resource system load, loader ID is 0. Let's see. Here we go. So we load. So assets, materials, test material, .kmt. Okay, so that looks good. We load all of the material properties. All right, so I'm going to step out of this. I'm pretty confident that that works correctly. So we've loaded up the resource. Now we need to acquire the material from configuration. The material name is still test material. So let's see. Our reference right now is nothing. Did we obtain a reference? So let's see. If the reference count is 0, auto release equals config auto release. So the fact that this is already a reference count of 1 tells me that either something didn't load correctly or didn't unload correctly, because this material seems to have never been released. But I bet its textures were. So register materials. What is the so the handle is 1. So state pointer registered materials sub 1. Oops, not I. 1. Okay. So we have no name. No textures. Yeah, so we have an invalid material here. But we got a reference to it. So that tells me that it was probably... the material itself was killed, but it was never actually removed from the hash table. I wonder if the texture system has the same problem. So, texture system. So we have a process texture reference here. You get this. Reference diff. Decrementing, this means a release. Destroy texture. Oh, interesting. So we never actually remove it from here either. So this problem is present in both. Well, no, we reset the references here. We reset the reference handle and auto release flags here. No, we're actually doing that here. But I'm guessing we didn't hit this because we had a material that still had a reference elsewhere. Dang it, I wish I hadn't stopped the program. Load. So I guess I should probably look at mesh unload. Because this should be in relatively the same order. So I'm actually going to do that. And I'm going to take a look at the unloading of this, because I suspect that is where the problem is. So we release the geometry. Reference. Okay. So that is good. Why didn't that? Destroy geometry. Oh, I stepped over it last time. Okay. I'm going to restart the application. I stepped over it. I hate when that happens. Okay. So there's that. Unload. Release. Destroy geometry. I don't think I need to do render or destroy geometry. This is probably what I need right here. So we have a material. Material name length is greater than 0. So we should release that. So the reference, we have a counter of 3. Okay, so we mark that down. Now we have a counter of 2. This material is test material, which is the same material we're using on all 3 cubes. So we can auto-release that once we get yeah, okay. So not this one. So those are geometry references. Okay, so that one is good. So let's continue to the next one. Let's go into destroy geometry. Material system release. We have a reference here. Reference count of 2, right? That should be test material. We subtract that. Now we have a reference count of 1, which makes sense. So we don't release that yet. Okay, and we'll continue to the next one. Destroy this. Release. Our reference now has 1. We subtract that. Now we have 0. And we are auto-releasing. So now we get the material itself, which is still test material, right? Yep. We destroy the material. So if we have texture, we release the texture. Let's see. So our reference count for that texture is now 0. Whoops. So we're decrementing. We have 0 reference count. So we get the texture, we destroy the texture, which is done there. Handle and the auto release are reset in the reference. The reference is updated in the hash table. That should be good to go. Okay, so we do the same thing with the other textures. We release the map resources. We release the renderer instance resources. We zero the memory, then we invalidate the IDs. And then we reset the flags, set the hash table. Okay. Hydrate to clear up my mind. Yeah, thank you for that. It's probably a good idea. So, the irony is I'm pretty much out of time for tonight, which means I'll probably have to pick this back up tomorrow. Tonight was mostly a debugging session, it seems, so I hope that was valuable. Let me just finish stepping through this. So why then... Sometimes I blink and just the time has just completely escaped me, right? So I think it's... I'm really beginning to wonder if it's this. Right? Like we know the resources are being released for the material. So why then are we getting material that's like half there? like we have a pointer to a material, but it's like totally uninitialized. Yeah, okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to think about this over the night, and come back to this. Because clearly there's something here that is just not adding up, right? So I think I'm going to stop here for tonight. We made some pretty decent progress in terms of cleaning things up and actually being able to load and unload. It's just I don't think something's being cleaned up correctly. And I'm not 100% sure what it is off the top of my head. So let me look at... So I've made some code changes here. I'm probably not going to... This probably isn't enough to bother pushing up tonight. I probably will just wait until the next stream to actually push this up. Because the branch does technically work without these changes. But, well, you know what? Nah, screw it. I'm going to push it up. I'll push it up now. That's fine. So let me just make sure I'm on the right branch here. I am. Okay. Git commit work in progress repeated load unload. All right. Yeah, I think that's where I'm going to call the stream for tonight, just because you know, it's gotten kind of late. I have to get up for work in the morning, and my brain is tired, I think. So we'll come back to this. I probably will do a stream tomorrow night. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see where we land on that. But yeah, I think this is where I'm going to wrap it up for tonight. So thank you all so much for tuning in and following along and interacting with the stream. I greatly appreciate that. And we will see you guys next time. I don't think I'm going to do a raid tonight just because I'm kind of tired. So I might do one tomorrow night, but I don't think I'm going to do one tonight. So I will catch you guys here potentially tomorrow around the same time. And we will get this troubleshot, and we'll figure it out. That way we can move on to configuration, right? Because I think we're just about there. So anyways, thank you guys, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.